you went under the wheels.
Affected.
Welcome to Under the Wheels. I'm Matthew.
And I'm Gabe.
And today we're colonizing inhospitable worlds and talking about the newest remake of Dune. I was going to say the author's name, but I forgot what it was.
Frank Herbert.
Frank
It's
Herbert.
The newest adaptation.
Yes. The newest adaptation of Frank Herbert's Dune.
Can you imagine if they did remakes in book form?
That is
Or
kind of
someone would be it's like, we're gonna do a remake of The Great Gatsby. It's like, what do you mean? I'm rewriting a novel of The Great Gatsby.
That's kind of interesting because it's true. Every now and then they'll do a reboot in comics, which is kind of follows the similar format. But movies and television are the only two medium where they do straight up this is the exact same thing, but I'm changing only these three elements and updating it for modern times. That's weird. I've never thought about that.
Yeah, no one's, remaking or rebooting The Great Gatsby where they replace every instance of the word chap or fellow with person.
They haven't gone through Huckleberry Finn and fixed poor Jim's name.
Oh, they just call him Poor Jim.
Poor Jim. Oh, Jim. Oh, Huckleberry Finn. Oh, dear. It's I know that authors will go back and on re-releases add things because there's the famous when J.R.R. Tolkien was writing Lord of the Rings and they were going to re-release The Hobbit, he went in and he completely changed the chapter with Gollum to make it more sinister and to tie it in better with Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
So authors will do that, but normally they don't just. Except maybe Ghost at a Watchman apparently is it's like To Kill a Mockingbird, but different. I don't know.
We're gonna reboot the Henry V franchise that Shakespeare started. We think there's serious money to be made there.
I wonder if it's a holdover from theater because in theater they'll restage something or they'll restage Shakespeare's
but
work.
In theater you don't have a choice. Otherwise no one's going to ever see it.
True. Limited time only. We're only running this play for it's the pop-up theater. They do. It's I wrote this incredible thing and spent 8 years of my life to only do it in this 3-week run. That
sounds so pretentious.
It's the hipster pretense of modern theater. We're going to stage it in this old abandoned farmhouse.
Oh my god.
All right.
You have to be bussed in.
We don't believe in soundproofing the walls to make it better for harmonics. And everyone's mumbling and you're just everyone's looking forward, straining to hear what they're saying in the play.
It's real. This is real life.
Speaking of people who mumble their lines, let's talk about Dune. All right. What do you give Dune? What's your rating?
I don't know.
Ooh.
I'm going to have to figure it out over the course of this show.
Okay. So what is it okay. What's it kind of between for you right now?
It's between an it's fine and a shiny and chrome.
Wow.
That's the range we're dealing with, and I have to kind of whittle it down.
Okay,
from there.
so so let's start. I have a starting place for us. I'm gonna give it a witness, but for kind of some weird reasons. But I think as we talk, we'll get into it. So I would say you went into this kind of with hesitantly, to say the least.
Ready to hate it. I was completely on board. This movie's gonna suck. I just have to get through it.
What are your bona fides for Dune?
I've read the book.
How recently?
Not very recently. I was 19.
Okay.
So, yeah, it was 7 years ago.
Okay, so I've read it more recently than you, but I will also say my memory of the book is because I would read it mainly during lunchtime and at night. So my memory of the book is just like scenes that happened. So when I'm watching,
so I read it in like 3 sittings.
Holy shit, you should go back and reread it. I bet you'd still like it a lot. I don't know if it holds up though, because I know people have like criticized Frank Herbert over like, I guess, I don't know, like being racist. I think about like the way
for
that he
appropriating Middle Eastern culture or whatever.
Is that what it is? I thought it was
I
because of like the Fremen and like everyone's like, oh, it's a white savior story, and it's like, it was the '60s. At least it wasn't the last of the Mohicans.
Yeah.
So I remember like various scenes that happened in the book, like general broad strokes. And so while I was watching
For a
the
second,
movie,
I thought General Broadstrokes was a character.
there's Duncan Idaho and General Broadstrokes, and so like there are things that there are moments of the novel that I remember, but as the movie was going, I was like, I remember that moment, I remember that moment, I remember that moment. So I feel like, and I could be wrong, but my memory of the novel, the movie does a good job of adapting the novel and keeping a lot of the material in. Was that kind of safe to say?
That mirrors my recollection of it, yeah.
Okay.
It's interesting because I figured going in that I was sure it was going to be a pretty faithful adaptation of the books. At least
Really?
in terms of like what the plot was and stuff. Well, yeah, because I know like with David Lynch's Dune, you know, he made a movie that was like 4 hours long, and I think they cut it down to 2.
Mm-hmm.
And the ending result was incomprehensible. Like literally, like you couldn't understand what was happening because the studio cut out so much.
Right.
So, you know, I think Denis and Warner Brothers and company,
Legendary.
less said about them the better. They sort of took the view like we have to be pretty, you know, close to what the books are, otherwise people are just gonna be really, really pissed off. Mm-hmm. Even though like the James McAvoy Dune miniseries, from what I've heard, is like very close to the books as well. So yeah, I fully expected it to be a faithful adaptation. I just figured like it would be so bland and depressing because it's Denis teaming up with Roger Deakins again.
Except he didn't.
What?
Deakins didn't shoot the movie.
Deakins didn't shoot this?
No.
Who shot it? Was it Bradford Young?
No. It was hold on, let me. Yeah, I was amazed as well. Yeah, it was shot by Greg Fraser. Or Greg Fraser. Greig space Fraser. Who shot Rogue One, which I think you can kind of tell. Foxcatcher, Zero Dark 30. He shot The Batman by Matt Reeves. So yeah, it wasn't. I think Deakins was busy shooting something else, and so they went with Greg Fraser.
Deakins was busy shooting Project Hail Mary with Phil Lord and Chris Miller.
Oh, that's interesting. And doing his podcast too.
I feel like that's all he does now. It's just he does his podcast and doesn't like. He's kind of retired from being a DP.
I mean, do you blame him? He's like
1,000 years old, so no. And he won like 3 Oscars in a row, didn't he, or something stupid like that? Like he never got a statue for ever, and then for like 2 just random movies that he did, it's like here's like 2 statues.
Well, to be fair, the cinematography in 1917 is really good.
It is really good, yeah, that's true.
Let's see, Roger Deakins. I know he won 2 in a row because he won for Blade Runner 2049. Yeah. But anyway,
he won for that movie.
He won for your favorite movie of all time.
Yeah. Well, okay. Anyway, I figured because it was Denis Villeneuve that it would be like incredibly dour, serious, slow, and not super great to look at. And in general, it was actually, despite being dour, serious, and slow, it was very good to look at. And it was actually quite interesting.
So like the things that didn't really work for you in Blade Runner 2049 with the cinematography and production design ended up working really well in Dune, I think.
Well, actually, no. I thought the cinematography and production design were the only things that worked about Blade Runner.
Okay.
Actually,
Okay.
no. The cinematography was
The
the only thing that
cinematography.
worked about Blade Runner. The production design was blech.
Well, I would
Production design in this I thought was really cool because it was like, I don't know, when I read the book kind of has this like Lawrence of Arabia swords and sandals feel to it. Mm-hmm. At least it did for me. So it's like it almost comes off as like a medieval fantasy. Mm-hmm. Whereas this I thought did a really good job of taking like kind of like a more modern military view of it, where it's like a lot of the machines look like, you know, they were built today with better technology in a way. Like a lot of what they do seems like a natural evolution of what we have right now.
Yeah. The one thing I didn't like was the color palette, which
Was one of my chief concerns about the movie.
yeah.
Like I wasn't really like jazzed for a all brown, all gray Dune.
Yeah, well, especially like when they're on what's the home planet? Caladan. I was like, my mind in the book was just like the most luscious, beautiful place ever. And then when they go there in the movie, it's just like still looks like
Iceland or something.
Yeah, I was like, it still looks like a scene out of Saving Private Ryan. I was like, this is not Caladan. But then when they get to Dune, it makes sense. Everything about their suits makes sense except for the fact that they're black. But I think, are they black in the book?
I don't remember.
Because I think they're black in David Lynch's version too. But like, I don't. It does to me. It seems weird that they'd be wearing black outfits on a desert planet where the sun is just baking them and making them really hot. But I digress. Yeah, like
but they're cooling. They got coolant systems in them. They're like
true.
Thor's costume.
That's true. Someone was like, "Why aren't any?" Why? The people I went with, for the most part, we all liked the movie. Although we all thought the movie was kind of boring and kind of felt like plate spinning. But one person was just like, "Why aren't they sweating?" And we're like, "They explained this. The suits just absorb all the sweat in their face. Their faces are exposed." I'm like, "Look, it's science fiction. You don't ask. You just accept it." Especially because like one of the big things in the book is like their water maintenance, their moisture maintenance. Mm-hmm. So like, I don't know. I feel like it does help to read the book. Although some of the people who I was watching with, they were like, yeah, we're a little bit confused because there's so many names, there's so many people. Mm-hmm. But they got sort of the general gist of it.
Yeah, and it's interesting because like they explain a lot. They explain, I think, everything that they have to. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of stuff that like I thought was really interesting about the book that they just kind of they never mention, like why there's no computers and things like that. Like I also thought the navigators were always a cool idea, but they don't ever show them, or like how interstellar travel works. Because like I always thought like because that is kind of the centerpiece of everything. It's like interstellar travel makes the universe go round, and everything else kind of feeds into that need. So it would be cool to see the navigators or see like a depiction of them, but they just kind of leave them out.
Yeah. Your memory of the book is a lot better than mine because I don't even remember the stuff about the navigators or anything like that. Like,
Yeah.
So maybe that's another reason is like my familiarity with the book is like relatively like I remember moments here and there. And like I remember the technology being really cool in like a Hideo Kojima-y way. It made me think of Death Stranding a lot, especially like the water absorption thing. I was like, oh yeah, that's just like the Monster energy bottle that Sam drinks out of.
Yeah. Well, the personal shields that they have are very like Kojima-esque.
Yeah.
Where it's like only slow projectiles can get through them and stuff.
Yeah. I think it's safe to say that Kojima was a fan of Dune as far as like his influences, his many influences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could see
definitely
that.
Dune, because that was probably around his wheelhouse when he was growing up. Like, oh, that'd be something I would read. Mm-hmm. So the cinematography and the production design worked really well for you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did you like the music? I'll get to the plot in a second, but I just thought I'd ask about the music because, yeah.
I like parts of it. Some of it sounded a little too Justice League-y.
Interesting. Okay.
Like anytime Wonder Woman's on screen, like some bitch is yelling.
A shot of the desert and spice blowing over the desert.
Yeah, it's like that. I hate that crap. That's so annoying.
Yeah, the movie was
like I think
not,
anytime
music
Hans
wasn't very
Zimmer isn't
subtle.
trying to make like exotic sounding desert music, it's pretty good. But when he is trying to make exotic sounding desert music, it's cringy as hell.
Oh man, I mean, I love Hans Zimmer and I love his musical scores. Like, we didn't talk about it in The Last Duel, but after we talked about The Last Duel, I was just like wandering around outside trying to think of the music for it, and I just inserted Gladiator's music in there instead. I was like, yeah.
Don't you mean Pirates of the Caribbean?
No, because the theme I like in Gladiator is like the dun. Maybe I'll put in a little clip of it. Dun 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 dun. You know that part where like after the battles and they're cheering, like that's the part that I'm like, yeah, that makes sense, especially in like The Last Duel, like Matt Damon walking around with that weird facial hair and all of a sudden dun 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 dun. Yeah. But yeah, no, the music in Dune was like not subtle at all. It's just so like over the top, like bashing me across the face for 2.5 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, so the music was kind of like it was whatever. Parts of it were good, but parts of it were super obnoxious. How about the cast? How did you like the cast? Oh well, because like I'm not the biggest fan of mumblecore Timothée Chalamet. My favorite role of his was in
Hostiles?
Yes, yeah. With his like French accent, and then he gets like shot in the head. Yeah, thank you. Good pull. Although that movie is, I like that movie. It's like it's a fun little movie that's super depressing. But the rest of the rest of the stacked cast, I really like. I like the actors in general. Like I like Rebecca Ferguson. I like Oscar Isaac. Who I really want to see like a King Arthur movie starring Oscar Isaac and his giant beard. Like
That would be interesting.
Josh Brolin's solid. Always down for Stellan Skarsgård because even when he's bad, he's good. Let's see who else. Oh my God, what's his name? Silva. It's always fun to see him and stuff.
Because you said Silva, I now can't think of his name. It's Javier Bardem.
Javier Bardem. I was like Anton Sugar. That No Country for Old Men came up in Jeopardy, and I was like, man, I really want to watch No Country for Old Men. And the final Jeopardy clue was like the Marines hymn. And then I was like, man, I really want to watch Saving Private Ryan. But yeah, so what did you think of the cast of Dune?
In general, I like the cast. I mean, Timothée Chalamet is still as lousy as ever. I mean, he there's so many scenes where he's just hissing his lines, and I'm like, how is anyone else in this scene going to hear you? Like, you're not using the voice right now. You know, you're just like, and the other thing too, it's like all the interiors of the movie are so gigantic, and usually when he's talking to people, they're like on the other end of whatever room, so that in the shot they can show off like this really big, imposing, spectacular, moody interior that they've created. And he's just sitting there going, and it's like, how is the dude at the other end of the room gonna hear that?
There's just a cut of the king of just like Timothée Chalamet mumbling his lines next to Sean Harris.
Those two in a movie together was a stroke of genius, I will say.
Oh my God. Yeah, I know now I'm just imagining that scene where he's like trying to get the people to cut his bindings of him just being like, stand up and cut my bindings. And then the guy, like, he's using the voice on the guy, and the guy's just like, What? What are you talking about? What did you just say? Oh my god. I made a joke that like Timothy Chalamet is going to win an Academy Award for being in a movie where he doesn't do anything but smile. Because he never smiles, and he's going to play off type and win. But anyway,
For a comedy.
well, he's in The French Dispatch, so
Not like a real like shit comedy, not a Wes Anderson comedy where it's like kind of melancholic.
Dumb and Dumber Twins, where he's just playing like the son of Jim Carrey.
No, it'll be like Boys Night Out or something like that, like one of those kinds of comedies.
Adam McKay decides to go back to doing like stupid fraternity style comedies. It's like Timothy Chalamet is my leading man. Timothy Chalamet.
Yeah, so I'm not a huge fan of his. Rebecca Ferguson, I could take or leave. You know, I always like Oscar Isaac. I don't adore him as much as some people, I think. But then all the supporting cast I like. I mean, Jason Momoa is always fun.
Yeah, Jason Momoa.
Josh Brolin's good in the right role. Yeah, Javier Bardem's great.
Yeah, in his limited screen time.
Yeah, that crazy like jujitsu guy from Too Old to Die Young is in here for some reason.
Is he the guy who dies at the spoilers? Dies at the end?
Yeah, he's the Freeman guy who dies at the end.
Okay.
So he's always like, I don't know. He's got a really interesting screen presence, and he's not in a whole lot. So it's cool when he pops up and stuff. Who else? What was I gonna say? Oh yeah, like all the Harkonnen crew, like David Destalmatian is always, you know.
Yeah,
creepy.
he's always fun.
Stellan Skarsgård is great. Dave Batista, I think of all of the pro wrestling turned actor people, like Dave Batista is 100 times the actor that The Rock and John Cena are. Like he's always, like all his parts are pretty simple. Like he never has to do a ton of work, but you always believe him 100% as whatever thing he is.
Yeah.
Like he shows up in all this crazy makeup as Drax, and you're like, yep, he's Drax. Mm-hmm. Or he shows up in a bunch of crazy makeup as Glossu Raban, the nephew of Baron Harkonnen, who's barely in the book. And you're like, yep, he's that guy. He's 100% that guy.
And then he shows up in Spectre, and you're like, man, he's wasted in this movie.
He's so wasted in that movie, yeah.
Shows up for 5 minutes in Blade Runner 2049. I guess the difference is like Dave Batista handles when they put him in a comedy, when he's good in a comedy, like as Drax, he's really good. But otherwise, he has this kind of like this sort of like Zen spirituality or Zen intensity about him that I like in like the quieter things. Like he seems like a quieter guy in general, so he can do sort of quiet, imposing, but also introspective really well. Which is why I liked him in Blade Runner 2049.
That's the thing that that's why I think he is so much better than like The Rock or John Cena, because it's like when you do see either of them in serious or more serious stuff, they just seem like these bizarro comic book characters. Like The Rock's eyebrows are still like flying all over his face anytime he makes an expression. Like you can't watch the Walking Tall remake and be like, yeah, man, The Rock is a bona fide action hero. You're just like, what the fuck is this shit? Whereas like Dave Batista knows how to be really subdued. He can like pull everything back. So he's not doing like this big pro wrestling performance, you know, he's doing like a film actor performance.
Mm-hmm.
And he does all the subtle stuff really well, which helps in a more serious movie, because then he can be kind of, you know, he can be kind of quiet and pulled back. And then when he needs to be explosive, it's even more impactful because he can create that contrast.
Yeah. So do you think like as Drax the Destroyer, that's kind of like how because I'm looking at his filmography right now, and it's like he was in stuff as far back as like 2006, but like Drax the Destroyer, that's where he turned the page, right? It's safe to assume.
Yeah, it's when he became a star.
Yeah, and that's where like they were like, oh yeah, he actually can act. And it's weird. Sometimes it's just like you just need that right role. I think like for a lot of actors, they just need that right role. Mm-hmm. Like Oscar Isaac, he just needed that right role, and because he'd been kind of starring in a bunch of stuff, and then like Inside Llewyn Davis, right?
Yep.
yeah, that came out, and then people are like, hey, Oscar Isaac, he's a pretty good actor. Let's put him in some other stuff. And
It's
then,
like, wow, he's more than just that dude who dies and Drive.
he's more than just like Mexican side character.
The cuckold husband.
Oh man. Oh, I'm like, yeah, I appreciate the fact that he's just like getting in as many things as he can, and at a certain point, I figured he did the Star Wars Episode 7 as like a paycheck, like, ooh, they're gonna pay me a lot of money for this one scene, and then they liked him so much, like, hey, you're not gonna die, and he's like, oh fuck, I gotta be in more movies, like the double-edged, like, I'm glad I'm gonna be in more movies, but kind of thing. And then like,
Yeah.
by the time the last one came out, he's just like the main character instead of Finn. It's just like,
Or Ray for some reason.
and in some ways, yeah, certainly in some ways.
He does more cool shit than she does.
I don't know about that. What always sticks with me is like when we were talking about the Rise of Skywalker, how you're like, I just love the fact that like the two Jedi or the two Force characters are like Dragon Ball Z style heroes, just like going nuts. And I was like, you know what? That is a choice, and I like that choice. So every time I think about the movie, that's what I think of, and I'm like, yeah, that's awesome. But yeah, Oscar Isaac, good actor. Yeah, Dave Batista. I feel bad because he's gonna get this like career of like putting him in really heavy makeup as like the side villain.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, he's a flexible actor. I mean, I didn't even realize he was in Spectre until I was like rewatching it. I was like, oh yeah, that's him.
Yeah, he's the Odd Job reboot.
He's the Odd Job who's like the second cousin of James Bond's mother or something.
Gotta tie it together. He's the Odd Job reboot who's Ray's father. And his name is also Ray, but it's spelled R-A-Y. Like, his name's Raymond, but he just goes by Ray. It's Ray Palpatine.
Christoph Waltz starts using freaking Force lightning. James Bond puts on a ring that turns him invisible. It's like, it's all connected. And who made that magical ring? I don't know. Q made it, wearing like a giant white beard. It's like, I'm a member of the Order of the Sacred Fire. James. Jeez. God. All right. So, how did you like the way they did the story?
I don't know. It's great until it isn't.
Elaborate.
So, I had this issue with the book, and because this movie is like half the content of the book, it is so much worse.
Well, so to be clear, at the start of the movie they say Dune Part 1, and so you know that they're going to stop the movie somewhere.
Yes, I don't care about that.
Yeah, I actually can draw parallels to like the Snyder cut with it. So, but go ahead.
So the book, the first half of it or so is just establishing the world, and then so I guess the plot of Dune is there's the noble house Atreides, there's the noble house Harkonnen. Harkonnen rules over the planet of Dune, where they mine spice, which is a hallucinogenic drug that looks like cinnamon, that eventually, that if you consume large quantities of it, will turn you into a human warp drive that allows you to transport spaceships across huge distances by folding the fabric of space-time. The emperor of this universe pulls Harkonnen out of Arrakis, the Dune planet, and gives it to the Atreides family. So the Atreides family takes over, and they learn about the the complex and rich history of Dune and its people, only to discover too late that this is a trap, that basically the Atreides family is on the rise and it's threatening the power of the Emperor. So the Emperor puts the Atreides family there so that they can be wiped out by the Harkonnens as well as Imperial troops. So the Atreides family is wiped out except for Paul and his mom. Paul's mom is basically a witch who's part of this order of witches that have been conducting like genetic experiments for thousands of years to try and produce like a Superman type character. And Paul is the result of those experiments as well. So they escape into the desert. They join up with the Arabs who live out there, basically. They learn their ways and how to like surf on sandworms and do other cool shit and ingest huge amounts of spice. And then Paul leads an army of these desert folks, along with like what remains of his family's troops, into the capital of Arrakis, where they basically wipe out the Harkonnen family. And then he dethrones the Emperor and takes the Emperor's daughter as his wife. And it kind of ends there. And then it's continued on in several more books that are very, like, they're not nearly as interesting. So this covers everything up until they join up with the desert people, the Freemen. Mm-hmm. So it goes through, like, establishing the world, learning about the rich lore and history of everything, but not all of it, just what they can fit in the movie, because they leave out the whole like computer thing, which I always thought was really interesting. But anyway, and
what do you mean? Like, what do you mean the computer thing?
So they don't have a lot of technology in Dune is like missing. A lot of technology we have now they don't have. And part of the reason, there's a couple of reasons for it, but the big one is there's no computers. And there's this whole thing where, like, you know, this takes place in the year, like, 10,000. Mm-hmm. So at a certain point in time, they had, like, really advanced computers and artificially intelligent robots and stuff like that. And eventually, there was, like, a Terminator Judgment Day sort of moment where the robots tried to take over and essentially waged a robot holy war against all of humanity. So the humans won and dismantled all the robots, got rid of all their computers, and all, like, any kind of intelligent machine was scrapped and banned. So then what they did to replace them is they created the Mentats, which are, like, that one guy.
Yeah, David Dalmatian.
Well, David Desmatian is one, and then that the really fat guy is the other one for the Atreides family. I can't remember his name.
Yeah.
He's a good actor too.
Yeah, he is. He always pops up.
But like, so they're basically humans who've had their brain function altered to where they can they have the same processing power as a computer.
That's why, yeah, and they have that scene where his eyes roll in the back of his head, and he's like blah 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 blah.
And he calculates some like really crazy number. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
So yeah, they're basically like human calculators or human computers. And there's other stuff like why don't they have lasers or guns? Like, why does everyone have swords? And it's because of the shields they use. Like, the shields will stop bullets, but they won't stop a knife. And then they don't use lasers generally because the energy shields that they have, if a laser touches it, will cause like an explosion big enough to blow a planet in half, which all combatants would want to avoid. Right. Generally.
The actor who plays that role is Stephen McKinley Henderson, by the way.
Stephen McKinley Henderson, thank you. What's the name of the character he plays?
Thufir
Hawat.
Yep.
That's right.
Yeah. So, okay. There's a lot of stuff that I had forgotten or didn't do research into on Dune, so I'm glad you're here to like clarify a lot of that stuff.
But anyway, yeah, so I guess the issue with the first chunk of Dune is it's like the plot doesn't really start until halfway through. Like, you kind of it's foreshadowed pretty heavily that the Atreides family is going to get wiped out and that Paul and his mom are going to have to go into the desert.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's when kind of the real adventure starts. So like while you're learning about the world and all this stuff, it's just kind of this feeling of like marching toward the inevitable. Like, you know where all this is going. It's only a matter of time. And then the movie does that as well with the combination of like having read the book already. So like not only have I read the book, but I also have the foreshadowing that's in the movie that again, and it also like again, like the tone, the pace, the direction is all this very like dour, somber dirge forward. So it's like this, it's just this march toward the inevitable. Like, it's like, when are we going to get to the part where everyone gets killed?
Right.
And then the story really begins. And then as the story really begins, the movie's over.
Yeah, that's why it feels like, and it's 2.5 hours. It feels like 2.5 hours of spinning plates.
It's 2.5 hours of prologue, which does not a good film make.
Necessarily. Does not necessarily make.
Period with a T at the end, like the Gen Z kids say.
Period.
And it doesn't help that, you know, Zendaya is like, this is just the beginning at the end of the movie. It's like, oh, thanks for throwing that in there, screenwriters. That was necessary. It's so faithful to the book that like the book doesn't really get going until halfway through. Like, it's interesting, but it doesn't get good until halfway through. It's like, oh, this is interesting. And then once you're halfway through, you're like, fuck, I have to get to the end. The movie's exactly the same way, except you don't have that second half. It's just like, oh, this is interesting. Oh, and it's over.
It reminded me of Zach, because I started watching Zack Snyder's Justice League, just like little bits of it here and there.
Like, how many times have you watched this thing?
This is only the second time. Remember when I said, oh yeah, I started watching it again? You know, that time? I only made it about 15 minutes in, and I was like, all right, I need to change.
Okay. I guess
So, so because it saves my spot on HBO Max, every now and then I'll click on it, watch a couple more minutes, be like, why did he choose to do it like this? And then like something else comes up. So, but like, they were talking about splitting that movie in half when they were still going to do it the Zack Snyder way. Yeah. And the place that they would split it is probably right before they decide to reawaken Superman. And if they did that, I would have felt kind of like I feel in Dune, where it's just like, that's your climax. That's so anticlimactic. And that's what I kept thinking. Like, if this were just released on HBO Max as like Dune, the 5-hour epic, it would have been like, okay, I'll try and find a way to sit through it with an intermission. But like, as an intermission, the place where it stops is not necessarily bad. But as a movie, it's just like, why did we end it here? Isn't there anything that's like more epic that we could have done? Like, this does not feel like the Battle of Helm's Deep.
Well, again, it's very faithful to the book. You know?
Yes. Yeah.
So it's like it feels like they tried to adapt the book as well as they could, and they just like, well, we're at the 2.5 hour mark. Let's just cut it off here.
Yeah, I mean, where would you have ended it? Like, if you were gonna make it into 2 movies, where else would you have ended it?
Well, I would have tried not to make it into 2 movies, because this is what I'm thinking, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of fans of various books will complain that the various movie adaptations of those books are not as good as the book.
Mm-hmm.
And to that I say, you're thinking about it the wrong way.
I think we have similar stances on this.
Because movies are, their objective is different than the book. Their storytelling methods are different than the book. Books can dispense information really quickly, whereas movies are better for allowing you to soak in information slowly. So like that content issue becomes a real problem. So then it ends up being like, you don't have to include every little scene, even if it's your personal favorite scene in the movie, because the movie doesn't really need, like, even the book didn't need all of it, you know?
Right.
So the movie definitely doesn't. So I was thinking, because, like, again, when I was reading the book, I always had images of Lawrence of Arabia in my head. Mm-hmm. Like, I just thought this is like sci-fi Lawrence of Arabia, basically. Like, in my brain, everyone's swords were curved for some reason. And in this, they aren't, which I was a little disappointed by. Lawrence of Arabia is 4 hours. It covers a lot of ground. It's really in-depth, and it's one of the best movies ever.
Yeah.
And it has a clear beginning, middle, and end. So, it remains to be seen what part 2 will be like. The thing with Dune is that the second quote-unquote half of it is a lot shorter than the first quote-unquote half of it in terms of text, but there's a lot more happening. And you see this a lot with movies where they split it into 2 parts, where like part 1 is like a beat-for-beat adaptation of the first 2/3 of a book, and then part 2 is the last third bloated out to like hideous levels of extravagance and length, to where it's just stretched so thin it falls apart. I don't know if Dune Part 2 is going to be like this just huge bloated mess. We'll see. I'm going to assume that they keep it pretty tight, which means we have to trim some of Dune Part 1. But I think you could trim half an hour off of Dune Part 1, have a 2-hour Dune Part 2, and have a 4-hour movie. And just go with that. It'll be like Lawrence of Arabia. You stick an intermission on there. You make it this big event for all the nerds. And you get to have like a beginning, middle, and end to your story instead of beginning and then the middle will arrive later. James Bond will return in the middle of this story. Like
it's No Time to Die and it just ends at the Cuba scene.
Oh my god. Yeah, pretty much.
The thing about the 4-hour movie, and I think we talked a little bit about this again, Zack Snyder Justice League podcast, is like no studio is gonna allow it. It's weird because Dune probably would have been the way that they were throwing the marketing behind it, Dune might have been the one movie that they might have even tried it on, because like it seemed like Warner Brothers had a lot of faith, but like one, nobody puts intermissions in movies, which I think is a shame. Two, because of the way that multiplex cinemas work, they try and get in a certain amount of showings a day. Like normally I would say, and 3, COVID, but like this movie was in production way before COVID, so that's kind of that's a non-starter. I'm actually surprised. Like, well, I'll talk about the production thing that I'm surprised about later, but like. I agree with you, and what they probably would have done if they were going to do something like that is they would have shot the 4-hour movie, cut it down to 2.5 hours, released it in theaters, and then released the 4-hour cut on DVD. Like that's probably what would have happened with that, because it seemed, because like as long as they can make the number of showings and bring in enough people, even if people hate it, they're like, that's fine. We still got $500 million, $1 billion off of it. And we'll release this other thing, and people will be like, finally, the definitive edition that we always had and could have released at any time in theaters, but chose not to because it's a lot easier to make my money back with a shorter movie. So, like, I agree with you. I think they could probably just make this a 4.5-hour movie. I'm curious though, because do you remember Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince? Or no, not that one. Deathly Hallows. Did you see both of those?
Unfortunately.
Did you also read the books?
Yep. Okay.
So when the first one came out, the Deathly Hallows Part 1, it was like so slow paced that many people complained about it. And then when they released the second half, I think like they responded to the criticisms of the slow pace, because Part 2 is like a really fast action movie. Mm-hmm. So it feels like, I'm wondering if that's what's going to happen here, because people are like, oh yeah, Dune, it's like there's so much world building, the shots are so pretty, it's so boring. Like,
wow, but that's how the book is. Like the book is already set up that way, where it is just like here's the history of this thing, and you're like, okay, and then once you get to page like 450, it's just like guns and explosions for the next 250 pages.
I'm looking over a plot synopsis, and I remember when Paul drank the water of life, because they're like, Paul drank the water of life. And I was like, oh my God, I remembered that. Like it felt like Paul was out of the book for like 50 pages when that happened. like the second half of the book does move faster in a way, but like it felt like people walking in the desert for like really slow paced walking in the desert for like another like 300 pages. Even though stuff is happening, it's just like the pace of the novel is slower. But I wonder if reactionarily they'll be like, oh, well, people complained about the pace of Dune Part 1, so now I'm going to re-engineer my editing for Dune Part 2 and make it faster.
I don't know if Denis Villeneuve's capable of that.
That was the other thing I was thinking of is like, would he even be able to?
It's got to be slow for him.
He's
Mr. Slow, serious French Canadian man.
French Canadian man.
Quebecois.
He does it the Montreal way. Yeah, I don't know. Like, did you find the movie boring?
No, not at all. I thought it was reasonably interesting. I mean, everything just looks so cool. It's interesting on that level alone. Mm-hmm. And Denis is a good filmmaker, so it's like he knows how to sustain people's interest. Yeah, I think it's just like, it's just like adapting Dune is very difficult, and it feels like even though it's 2.5 hours, it feels like I watched half a movie. Yeah. Well, and like the other thing, like you said, you could probably cut out a half an hour just by trimming the beginning and ending of certain scenes, or not having a cut back to this or that. Like, it was weird because I felt it feels like a lot is happening and yet nothing is happening, and yet it feels like a lot of interesting. Like it's keeping my interest, but at the same time, my mind is also kind of wandering. Like that's how I felt when watching it. So when I was saying earlier about like reading reviews that kind of primed me, like when I would describe it, I'm like, yeah, it's cool, but kind of boring, because like the action scenes are not as like they're not kind of what we're used to in movies. Like the music is playing really loudly. And like there's action going on, but it's not necessarily the most engaging action. And there's not a lot of it. Yeah. You know? So that's why I'm like, I felt like it was a little bit, I guess, like reading a novel. The other thing is like Dune pioneered so many things. And I kind of touched on it earlier when I was joking about Death Stranding, but Dune pioneered so many science fiction things that are like commonplace now. You know, like the Star Wars mentality of like, we're going to explain some stuff, but not explain everything, and you're just going to have to go along with it. Like that appears in this movie, but at least with Star Wars, they had a very simple storyline to kind of like act as the through line. Whereas with this, it's like, we're not really going to explain too much. And also here's a bunch of characters, and also here's a bunch of like the way society works, and there's Stellan Skarsgård in a giant fat suit and he's floating, which they explain in the book, but they don't really explain why in the movie. And so like it's just like, I think for a lot of people it might be hard to, especially if they haven't read the book or they're not fans of science fiction, it might be hard for them to like grasp exactly what's happening. But I also think there's enough in there that like watching the movie and being like, wow, it ended there, but what happens next? I must go out and buy this book now. I can see that being a case as well. Maybe. Hopefully it's not just like, wow, that was boring and unsatisfying. I'm done with this. I mean, I have to go off of my very limited target audience, but like, but yeah, my brother-in-law was like, oh, yeah, I kind of want to pick up the book and just read the second half. I'm like, no. If you pick up the book, you got to start from the beginning. Otherwise, you're going to see these quotes from Princess Aurelian, and you're going to be like, who? Yeah. That was the thing I liked about the book, is like it teased this character because they had so many passages at the beginning of every chapter where she says something, and I was like, huh, who is this character and what's her effect on the story? So, I'm actually surprised that it's doing as well as it is doing, to be honest. Like, they came out 2 days after it was released, and they're like, yeah, we want to make part 2.
we just have to wait for that other production company to give us the green light to make it, and we'll make it. And I'm like, really? It's making that much money? Like, finally finally WB was able to like properly market a really expensive movie.
I know.
Is what I thought.
Well, and it's like, I don't know. It's one of those movies that's like, did we need a readaptation of Dune? No. Did we want one? No. Is it still probably worthwhile? Yeah, I guess. So yeah, I mean, I'd be interested to see part 2. I mean, it's not like Blade Runner 2049 where it's like oh fuck yourself. It's funny. Denis was saying, I guess Christopher Nolan came up to him after making 2049 and asked him like, "What the hell is wrong with you?" It's like it wasn't quite like that, but it was just like he's saying, it's like, dude, like Blade Runner's a classic. Who the hell do you think you are? And I'm like,
hey,
good for you, Christopher. I must say, Mr. Nolan, you've done it again.
I mean, like, to be fair, they made a remake of Ben-Hur, so nothing's really sacred.
Well, actually, the Ben-Hur is a remake of Ben-Hur.
Yeah, and 10 Commandments is a remake of the 10 Commandments.
Yep, so Ben-Hur's been remade plenty of times.
Yeah, like, I guess Denis Villeneuve also said that like Blade Runner 2049 is his biggest mistake, and he's surprised that he was able to get any new projects after that. And it's like, yeah, there is no reason to
I don't think he understands why it's a mistake, though.
What I just saw the headline. Why did he say it was a mistake?
You said it was a mistake because it didn't make money.
I mean, who's gonna go and see like the sequel to a classic that also didn't do well at the box office, but also the sequel is 45 minutes longer than the first movie? Like,
what's interesting is I read that Blade Runner was considered a flop, but it was number 1 at the box office for like 3 weeks in a row when it released.
Really?
Yeah.
That surprises me.
Well, because I was reading about The Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons it was, and people were trying to figure out why, like, why was such an amazing movie so widely hated when it came out?
Yeah.
And why did it do so poorly? And one of the theories is that there was like sci-fi fantasy fatigue at the time, where there's like a new science fiction movie out every minute. And it was released the same day as Blade Runner. And Blade Runner crushed it at the box office, and The Thing made like almost no money.
That sucks. That's also crazy. Like 1981, right? That's when Blade Runner came out. 1982. So The Thing and Blade Runner both came out in 1982. Oh my God, it's a good year for science fiction. And then when did Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark come out?
I think that was 81.
Or I should say Raiders of the Lost Ark, because, you know, Indiana Jones is not in the title of that movie. That one's 81. So Blade Runner actually did well-ish, but it was still but everyone says that it was like a box office flop.
I think it just cost too much. It wasn't that it made I think it made a lot of money. It was just too expensive.
Everyone saw it the first 3 weeks and they're like, why are we watching this? It's so boring. Because, you know, people at that time were used to like Star Wars action stuff and like not really slow, thought-provoking science fiction.
People in 1982 had their heads firmly planted up their asses. Because there are reviews accusing The Thing of being boring. And The Thing is many things. It is not boring.
Everyone missed that jump scare because like the first part is just building tension so much that they're just like, what? They're just like, I'm tired, I'm gonna sleep. And then he touches the thing with the electrode and the blood like splurts out, or the blood like does the weird thing.
Yeah, I wish I could have given Roger Ebert his last rites or something, and just like I would have just sat there next to him on his deathbed and been like, do you take back what you said about The Thing?
I need to know. He
Take
probably
it back.
didn't. Think about, like, it's Roger Ebert. He probably tripled down and was like, the Thing is the worst piece of shit I've ever seen. Like, you don't have to go that hard on it. Like,
Well, what's crazy is John Carpenter's whole career was like torpedoed because of that movie. Because the best movie he ever made and one of the best movies of all time was a failure. That it torpedoed his career.
Like, budget $15 million. Oh, the 80s.
Yeah.
It was a big budget movie, $15 million. Yeah, that's crazy. Well, didn't he make Big Trouble in Little China after?
Yeah, which he himself is not like that fond of.
That's
he
weird.
He was saying in an interview, like, it's like, I had fun making Big Trouble in Little China and some of those other movies in the mid 80s, but if The Thing had taken off, everything could have been different. Like, he said it in this really like depressing way. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah. It's hard to look back on that and just like be able to embrace the stuff that you really like, that you did really well, when something that you were hoping to be amazing just doesn't work, which is like, it's weird because we can actually connect it back to Dune, because like, after Blade Runner 2049, it's like, how many more people get their chance at doing like their Heaven's Gate again? And Denis Villeneuve did get to do it because he got to make Dune, which I'm guessing is another like passion project of his.
I guess. I didn't realize he was such a big sci-fi fan. I thought he just kind of got like co-opted into doing Dune because they're like, oh, Denis, you're like the serious but also big budget science fiction guy. You should make Dune now, because that's what the world needs. And then he's like, you're gonna pay me to make a movie? Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I would have never thought of him as like
real dollars, not even Canadian dollars, to make a movie. I'll do it. You got me.
That's what they're gonna do, like to get to make their box office back. It's like, it's $165 million Canadian. Or the other joke is like Australian dollars, AUDs or whatever.
Aussie dollars.
Yeah.
Aussies.
It's like, it cost me 165 million AUD, which is the equivalent of 15 American dollars.
This whole movie cost 10 billion yen to produce. How much is that? It's like $25.
What was funny was like, I felt like Zendaya was, well, one, she's having like she's having a really good career in like weird sci-fi or like alt type stuff. Like, it's not the traditional types of movies I would think that she would be in, but she also was in Dune for all of like 10 minutes, and yet she's like like really heavily promoted on everything for it.
Yeah, well, I mean, she is like an important character in the book, and she's really only in the second half. Yeah, I mean, people were upset about that. I'm like, well, I guess that's understandable, but having read the book, like, I knew exactly what I was in for. Like, I knew she wouldn't be in the movie much.
Yeah, especially when it starts winding down and you're like, oh, just, I didn't think she was going to be in the movie that little, though. I thought that they would get to like the Fremen earlier than they did. So like you were, I guess like kind of like you were saying, it's like you could have probably sped up the beginning.
Yeah, I thought they might get to the worm writing part before they close it, because that might be a cool like finale for part one.
It's like the end of the never-ending story. He's just riding a worm. He's like, yeah!
Yeah, I know. But I mean, that's kind of why like it works, because it is like a very upbeat moment, and it's like the only upbeat moment in the whole fucking book. Because the book is also incredibly dour and depressing.
It is. Yeah. The ending's depressing, even though it's supposed to be this great thing.
Well, because everyone in the book is so like just ruthless and cold-blooded. Like literally everyone, even Paul.
Oh God, yeah, Paul, especially Paul near the end.
Yeah, so it's like
fucked up.
Yeah, I feel like that would have been a good way to like end part one, and then you go into part two, and it's just all action. But yeah, I don't know.
It'd be like they make a third part. It's like Dune: Battle of the Five Armies. It's just like Denis Villeneuve's like, I'm not going to adapt Doom Messiah after all. It's just like, we want to make sure that we can expand the final action scenes.
You know, speaking of action and Timothy Chalamet.
Okay.
How are they going to find an actor for Fade Ratha who's more frail than he is?
I don't know. Who is Fade Ratha? For all of us who don't know or don't remember.
Oh, he's one of the main villains of the book who's not in the first movie. Because he really only, like many characters, he really only shows up in the second half. Because that's how Dune works. He is Baron Harkonnen's other nephew. So Glosser Raban, who's Dave Batista in this movie, is the older nephew. Fade Ratha is the younger nephew. And he's kind of like the secondary main villain behind the Baron. But like there's a fight scene between him and Paul at the end of the book and at the end of the David Lynch movie where Fade Ratha is played by Sting, of all people.
David Bowie wasn't available.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Well, David Bowie probably would have been too old.
Oh.
David Bowie could have played the Duke. The thin white Duke Leto Atreides.
What they'll do is they'll just hire an actor and then use the technology they used in The Martian to like shrink him down. Let's get Matt Damon again. Matt Damon and his kind of like his dad bod face on like a really it's
weird to see like Timothy Chalamet, who looks like a gust of wind could pick him up and carry him away, having these like very hard physical fights with people.
Yeah, I was
like the jiu-jitsu guy who's the free so at the end of this movie he and his mom join up with a Freeman group led by Javier Bardem, who they met earlier in the story. And Javier Bardem kind of vouches for them after a while. Like he needs a little convincing, but he eventually vouches for them. He's like, all right, you guys can come with us, I guess.
Yeah.
But there's this other dude who's just like incredibly angry. He's like, no, nah, I hate them.
I hate them.
I slaughtered them like animals. I hate them.
Not just the women Atreides, but the women and the children Atreides. But yeah.
So yeah, he challenges Paul's mom to a fight, and Javier Bardem's like, well, she can't fight. She's a lady. So he's like, I'll fight whoever wants to represent her. And then Paul's like, well, okay, I'll fight you. And they have this fight, and Paul obviously wins because he's the main character. But it's like, how? Like, I know in real life this dude would tear Timothy Chalamet's arms off and feed them to him. Like, so it's just like, it's weird watching them fight, and I'm like, man, I don't buy this 100%. Like, the choreography's good. You know, the performances here are good. Like, everything that's supposed to be working is working, but I just don't buy it.
Well, do you remember they have that one, like, gratuitous one-shot tracking shot of, like, a warrior dressed as Fremen, like, killing all of the people? And then, like, the mask comes up, and it's just, like, an awkward digital insert of Timothy Chalamet's face. Do you remember that?
Yeah,
with,
they have Ray Park running around murdering people. And then his visor lifts up, and it is Timothy Chalamet's face digitally superimposed on the inside of this helmet.
It's so bad. Like, it's the uncanny valley, but for all the wrong reasons.
I know.
And it's just like, that's in essence what you're talking about with Timothy Chalamet playing Paul. Like, is this one of those things, like, on paper it should theoretically be perfect, but because he refused to gain muscle like a Marvel hero, it just doesn't work?
Maybe. I don't even know if it's perfect on paper. I don't know, he's just this wispy, hissing lad who's just annoying as fuck. Like, again, I think I mentioned in our episode on The King, he hisses all his lines. It's like, how's anyone going to hear you? I mean, Timothy Chalamet, I've never understood the fascination with him. I find him incredibly obnoxious. I think he's the least obnoxious out of all his roles in Dune. So that is a good thing.
Aside from Savages.
Yeah, he's pretty great in Hostiles.
God damn it. Yeah, I mean, like, he's reined in enough, but I kind of agree with you. The only thing I can think of is because like his hair looks so perfect on the poster for Dune that they were like, we're hiring him because of his hair. And because he's like the up and coming actor of the moment. We're gonna try and Taylor Quiche him and make him a thing.
Remember when Kyle MacLachlan was the up and coming actor of the moment for half a second?
Yeah, I remember I was like, yeah, this guy, he's great. And then you look at his resume and you're like, yeah, this guy, he's in a lot of weird movies, but he smartly like hitched his trailer to David Lynch and just never went off of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like Kyle MacLachlan is my definition of like absurdist surrealist actor.
Yeah,
when I
they
think
need
of
to
it.
combine David Lynch's Dune with David Lynch's other properties to make his Dune even weirder than it already is.
They do Twin Peaks season 4 and it's just like linking to David Lynch's
Like,
Dune.
I'd be okay for like an Agent Cooper Paul hybrid.
They just reshoot scenes with like where Kyle MacLachlan plays both the father and Paul, and
He
they
still
don't even
talks
work.
to Diane on his tape recorder. Like he's out in the desert, he's like, Diane, I've had a cup of coffee and a slice of pie, and I'm ready to start my day. I'm off to commit a hate crime. Like
He has like he puts in like the thing for his nose and then blows on the whistle. Ah, perfect. Oh my god. So if not Timothée Chalamet, who would you have thought would be better casting for Paul?
I don't know. Maybe some unknown actor. There's
Should we
plenty
just
of
get-
nobodies out there who need a big break.
Like who should we have gotten? Daniel Kaluuya. Let's just go.
Yes.
Let's just do it.
No, not Daniel Kaluuya.
Well, if he's gonna mumble his lines, you go with Lakeith Stanfield anyway. So
Not Lakeith Stanfield. No, Finn from Star Wars. Have him be Paul.
oh my god, John Boyega.
John Boyega, yeah.
You know, I was so on board. Like after The Force Awakens came out, I was so on board the John Boyega train. But like everything that I've heard about him since, he seems like he's very difficult to work with.
I don't know. We'll see. I mean, studios love portraying actors who ask for better pay or, anything really as difficult to work with.
Yeah. Well, I guess the other thing is
It's like what the UFC does. Anytime a guy asks for more money, they just call him a coward in every press outlet they can and say, oh, he's a pussy. He doesn't want to fight, blah, blah, blah. And they try to get like his ego all riled up. So he signs the fight contract for like a stupid low amount of money to be getting kicked in the head for. It's the same thing. Studios do that with actors all the time.
I guess that's true. I don't know. There's something like, and maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm just old, but it's like if you're part of this thing that you created, like you should try to support it as best as you can and not like shit all over it if it doesn't come out the way you like it. Like why? It's the whole thing of like, and maybe it's a bad philosophy to have, but it's just like, don't like play nice because you never know where your next project is coming from. Don't play nice. And it's like, I don't know if I want to work with John Boyega because not that I ever would get that opportunity, to be fair, but so truthfully, if I could work with him, I probably would because it's a way to get the movie to sell. But like I don't want someone after making the movie to be like Robert Pattinson and just talk shit about how creepy the character is and how terrible the movies are. Like, no, you kind of want like some support. You want to show
I
that
don't know,
like
man.
you give a damn.
John Boyega and Bobby Pattinson won over so many people by openly admitting that the movies they were in were garbage.
I guess, but like, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it just comes from like an old place. Maybe I'm Matt Damon in The Last Duel, and I'm just like, you have to show some loyalty to the project. You were part of it, and it's like, you know what? Maybe like why? The better question is like, why do you need to show that loyalty? I would think just because it's like you want to support. I don't know. I think like you want to support the movies you're part of, and if you talk shit about it, it makes it dangerous. Like if I'm a filmmaker, why would I want to hire you if like it doesn't turn out perfectly or the way that you want it? Now I'm worried that you're just going to go around saying it's a giant piece of shit, and I was embarrassed to work on it and things like that. But you do bring up a good point. Like, John Boyega is probably more like maligned because of it than other actors who have talked out about projects not being great. And he's also just doing it earlier because a lot of people go back and they're like, yeah, this was a terrible movie. Like, Spielberg is just like, yeah, Hook is the worst movie I ever made. And I'm like, yeah, but you also made Always. But there are people out there who do like it, or, you know, the movie takes on a life of its own. And like, to have the lead character sitting there, like if Val Kilmer came out on Spartan and he's like, Spartan's a piece of shit. I don't know why I ever did it. Like, David Mamet's insane and it's such a horrible movie. And I'm like, I don't know, Val, it's one of my favorite movies of yours. Like, I would be very sad and like, oh, the actor who was in it doesn't even like it. It's like, he didn't even like the thing that he did. You know, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, think about, I just, like, from a studio perspective, it's fucked up because then the studio's just like, oh, you're not supporting the movie? We'll never hire you again. But as a creator, it hurts. I would imagine, you know, like poor J.J. Abrams is like trying to, a movie that he had 4 years to make. Now he has to do that again in 2 years. And your lead actor comes out and he's like, yeah, it's shit. The reason it's shit is legit, but you know, it's like,
well, but it's like, if you're does J.J. Abrams, does anything about the Rise of Skywalker suggest to you that J.J. Abrams cares?
I know, it's like the Hobbit of the Star Wars movies, where it's like Peter Jackson in the Hobbit movies was more interested in making like his version of a Lord of the Rings movie, like from his brain dead days, than he was about making like a legitimate follow-up to Lord of the Rings. So it's probably the stance I would take. I know we've gone way off topic. So you think John Boyega would be a good Paul? Yeah, I could see it.
I could see it. You could have Denzel Washington as Leto. Like, that would be pretty sweet.
Although they'd probably just get Jamie Foxx to do it.
Oh, I know. Why is Jamie Foxx like dollar store Denzel?
What if they got Michael B. Jordan to be Paul?
Oh my god, that might be a little too much, because Michael B. Jordan is built like a brick shit house.
Yeah, but
he doesn't
John
look
Boyega,
like an aristocrat. I feel like John Boyega could play an aristocrat, you know?
Yeah, I could see it. I thought you were like a brick house. I'm like, yeah, but John Boyega has an ass that won't quit. I have seen The Rise of Skywalker, sir. They can put him in parachute pants and it still would not. Yeah. For some reason in that movie, last thing about Rise of Skywalker, for some reason in that movie, he's obsessed with jumping over things. Like kind of like how in Tenet, John David Washington keeps doing pull-ups. In Rise of Skywalker, John Boyega keeps jumping over things randomly. And one other thing on Dune that I feel like I should mention is like the sound design, the people who had to create the various sounds for the movie, I thought did a fantastic job. Like, I love the sound design in the movie. I know that's a very niche Matt type thing.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think. Like, in general, I liked it. I think there's a lot of like, I don't know. There's a lot of movies where you just have like warbly bass for every sound effect. Mm-hmm. And Dune kind of has that, but the scene on the Sardaukar planet is so cool and so bizarre.
Yeah, where Stellan Skarsgård's coming out with like the oil on his face.
No. The Sardaukar planet, the Imperial prison troops.
Oh, okay.
Like, I thought that was so cool, and the way they, like, the look of it, the sounds, the weird language they speak, and the way they like fuck up that guy's voice so he just sounds like super scary. Like, I thought all that was really neat. And if there's a perfect example of everything they do coming together to work really well, I would say it's that scene where it's like, this is all really neat. They didn't have to do all this, but they did, and it works really well.
Well, I mean,
But
also,
like the worm, like the sounds the worm makes are just like, yeah, that's what I expected.
is that bad though?
I don't know. So I like having seeing a new perspective sometimes. You know,
Yeah.
I don't want to get exactly what I expect. I expected this movie to be shit, and it wasn't. So I don't want exactly what I expect.
I will say, so like the sounds of the Baron and like the gravity machine he has. I mean, I know that he just copied and pasted that sound from Blade Runner 2049, but I still appreciate it. Like I feel like Blade Runner 2049 was like the rough draft, and here he's like, okay, this thing didn't work, but this might work better. So, but I like the sound design. I thought it was appropriate. Like you said, a lot of the production design department, sound, camera work, all of that stuff I thought was really good. And I think Weta Workshop did most of the work on designing the outfits and the technology and stuff. I think. I know that they worked on. I don't want to go too. I don't want to like derail it too much and go too far. But I think they were saying how like they were talking about the costume design, which again, I'm kind of sad because I just think that I would have liked it better if they had more of a color palette. Although the blue eyes stick out a lot more with such a muted color palette.
They do.
Yeah, so I can see why they might have wanted to go.
If it was my Dune, it would be more colorful, and then the blue eyes would fucking like glow out of their skulls,
like in David Lynch's,
but worse.
Every scene is like just a bunch of fog, so that like you can see laser beams with their blue eyes.
Yes.
Yeah, it's hard. I think like
also,
the balance is hard. Yeah.
This movie has good fog effects. For once, it's like the first big blockbuster in decades to have good fog effects.
You give me an example.
When Timothée Chalamet and his mom are hissing in the fog after the Reverend Mother visits.
Yeah.
Like all that was really cool, very moody, atmospheric. Like a lot of the stuff on Caladan looks really cool. All the fog effects on Getty Prime look cool. And the Sardaukar planet for good measure. Yeah, I'm trying to think of like, cause like fog and smoke are kind of a lost art.
Yeah.
Like you watch Empire Strikes Back and see how smoky and foggy like all those scenes are. Like on Dagobah, on Hoth, on Bespin. Like it adds like this tactile layer to it that is just so absent from the, the parking lot universe of Marvel.
Yeah,
and also it's like, have any of these Marvel people been to New York City? There's fog everywhere in New York. There's like you don't even need a fog machine. That shit is just coming up out of the sewer at all times.
Martin Scorsese's Spider-Man. It's just like 3 hours of the portholes or the manholes with smoke coming out of it.
It's like Taxi Driver and Spider-Man put together. Like there's just it's like the piss steam coming out of the manhole covers, and Spider-Man swings through it while it's playing that was it Bernard Herrmann jazz score.
A Daredevil, like a Martin Scorsese Daredevil movie would be like pretty interesting. But he'd probably just do The Punisher, and he's like, why would I do The Punisher? I made Taxi Driver. It's the exact same thing.
I know.
Okay, so now that we've talked about Dune and many other movies, where do you fall on this movie? Are you still torn?
I think after hashing it out, I'm gonna give it the most boring rating I can. It's a witness.
It's like it's weird, right? Because I
feel like if I give I'm at a point in my life where I feel like if I give a movie a witness, I'm like, I don't have a good opinion on it. Like I'm caving.
Why you feel like you're caving if you give it a witness?
Yeah. Like,
do you feel like people should see the movie?
I feel like the people should see this movie and its sequel together.
Yeah. So then I mean, so I'm guessing at this point the things that you like about it, like the production side, do you like how loyally or how well it follows the novel? Do you like that aspect of it? Or do you just appreciate it? Do you like it?
I appreciate it.
Okay.
I don't love it, but I appreciate it. Like I think they do a good job of being faithful to the book and taking liberties where it makes sense or where it seems cool.
Yeah.
Like they don't take liberties unnecessarily. I feel like anytime they do change something, there's a good reason for it, or at least a neat reason for it. And yeah, they don't cut anything out that is like important. They pretty much leave all of the really essential stuff in.
So if this was like Sword of Doom, where they made Sword of Doom and they were supposed to make a sequel to it, but the movie didn't make enough money, so they left it off. This
Wait,
would
you
be
say
like
Doom or Dune?
Doom, Sword of Doom.
Oh, Sword of Doom.
Yeah. I think it's called the Sword of Doom.
Is that the Japanese movie?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought you said sort of Doom. Like it's like Doom, but sort of. So you mean it's Wolfenstein?
It's like a hack of Quake. If there was not a sequel planned for this, then this would be fine. Is my assumption from you?
No, this movie needs the second half. It, like the state it's in is the state of disrepair.
Right. So like if they didn't greenlight the sequel, it would be like mediocre.
If they didn't greenlight the sequel, I would say this is really great, but don't anyone waste your time.
Mm-hmm. So do you think it's worth watching now, even though the sequel isn't out yet?
I guess if you don't want to break it up into two parts.
Fair enough.
It's weird because it's like people need to watch the movie in order to get the sequel. It's like a community achievement in an online video game or something.
Yeah.
Like if enough people do this, everyone gets the prize. And if everyone sells enough box tops, you get a pizza party.
This is Metal Gear Solid 5 Ground Zeroes.
Yeah, so it's like if everyone sees the movie, then you'll get the rest of the movie.
It's the worst DLC ever where it's like, oh yeah, the ending's behind a paywall. Okay, just the ending? No. Half the content and the ending.
The rest of the game is behind a paywall that everyone has to pay for.
And if you don't, we delete it forever. Did you see it in theaters?
No, I watched it at home.
Okay. I saw it in theaters, and like I thought it was one of the things I think that I liked about it was like this is one of those movies that I feel like you need to see in theaters. So a lot of the impact of like the vast vistas and the grand images, I think really work. But then it's also countered by like these extreme close-ups of Timothée Chalamet like mumbling his lines, which is kind of distracting, like on a cinematography level. So like it's like out of all of the movies that you could see in theaters, I would recommend this over most. But at the same time, you know, it's again just like a movie all about setting up the next movie.
Yeah,
which is kind of sad.
It is.
But I mean, I think A Witness is good because like there's a lot of tender love and care that was put into it. And it's not like it's partially their fault as screenwriters for not finding a satisfying place to stop the movie. And it also felt like a movie that like the entire budget was thrown on screen. You know, it looks vast and it looks imposing. And as far as Dune, as far as like your reading of it, aside from the curved swords, did this hold up or exceed your expectations in comparison to what you were reading?
Well, no, it was a different take on the book. You know, it was like I think the way they adapted the look and feel of everything is very different from how I thought of it. But I think it has a lot of cool ideas. I like their perspective on things.
Okay, I do too. It was very enjoyable. So we both kind of come to this weird consensus of Witness.
Yeah.
Not bad enough to be fine, but not good enough to be shiny and chrome. I think Witness is good on that. But anything else you want to talk about on Dune? Anything that popped out that you were kind of interested in pointing out that we haven't yet?
Not really.
All right. Well, if they want to shout at us or help fund our sequel podcast to the sequel, where can they find all of our links?
So you can find our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and YouTube. Our YouTube channel is just Under the Wheels, and our website is underthewheels.com. You can also reach out to us at video@underthewheels.com with questions, comments, requests, or whatever. No viruses, please. No.
Not those kind of Trojan horses.
Just like, subscribe, leave a comment, just spread the word. If you like the show, tell other people about it. That's always a big help.
Yeah. I also want to end with this. Like, I didn't know how you were going to react. My faith in humanity and movie making is a little bit like relieved by the fact that you were able to enjoy this movie.
I was so ready to hate it, but I liked quite a bit of it.
Good. I'm glad you enjoyed the two suns, or however many suns are on the world of Dune.
There's
also,
one sun, but there's two moons.
There's two moons, and it messes with the gravity or the magnetic pole, right?
Yep.
Well, that's our show for today. I'm Matthew.
I'm Gabe.
And you've just been Under the Wheels.
I mean, I feel like there's a lot of... It's interesting because Pixar gets all the love and attention, but there's a lot of DreamWorks movies that are really good.
Yeah. That I never watched for the longest time because I thought they were beneath me.
Like Megamind?
I saw Megamind.
Okay, good.
Megamind's amazing. I the cynical sense of humor that kind of DreamWorks started off on, after I turned like 17 or 18, I was just like, this is so tired and played. Yeah. Which is why when Tangled was being advertised like that, I was like, this is going to be fucking awful. And the movie is anything but that, which is why I really liked it. But DreamWorks has gone, Ferdinand was actually really good. Although Ron's Gone Wrong was 20th century animation.
Okay. So technically Disney.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like a Disney movie that they're too ashamed to put under like the Disney animated label because their animators didn't work on it, but it's a lot better than some of the stuff that Disney's been putting out. What else has DreamWorks put out recently?
An excellent classic.
Yeah. I never saw Kung Fu Panda.
Wait, to this day?
Yeah.
You're shitting me.
No.
Okay. Watch Kung Fu Panda. That's your homework. Fucking
Welcome
hell.
to Under the Wheels. I'm Matthew. You're Gabe, and in today's episode, we're going to be talking about Kung Fu Panda, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs.
It's just gonna be screaming at you like, how have you not seen Kung Fu Panda all these years? That movie is so good.
It was during that time I was just like, I wasn't feeling like DreamWorks. I still don't. Like, if a DreamWorks movie comes out, like I usually only see it because Aaliyah wants to watch it. And she'll drag me to it. And I'm like, one of the best things about it is like, I normally don't see these kinds of movies, and I'm glad I get to. Because, like you said, DreamWorks has been,
Dude, no, like, Kung Fu Panda is the best DreamWorks animated movie. Like, it's like that and Megamind.
How to Train Your Dragon?
Oh, fuck, that's DreamWorks too, isn't it?
Yeah.
Those movies are really good. They're not as funny as Megamind or Kung Fu Panda, but they definitely have a lot more like heart to them.
Yeah.
And they're a lot darker too.
Yeah. Oh, especially like I didn't see the second one. I saw the first one and the third one. Oh my god, the third one. It was so sad. I was like, why?
How to kill your dragon.
It wasn't even that. Aaliyah's like, you take friendship things like really hard. Like that's why I cry with Lord of the Rings, is because like the friendship aspect. Like when Sam isn't welcomed by everyone, everyone's celebrating Frodo, and Sam like peeks in, and I'm like, he's your best friend. But yeah, like the relationship between the two, like the dragon and Gabe
Toothless and Hiccup.
Yeah, in the How to Train Your Dragon. Also, like he has a flaming sword, I guess, starting with the second one, and I'm like, this is fucking awesome. Because it's like a science-based flaming sword, so he has to like change cartridges out, and I'm like, yeah, this is badass.
Finished.